As someone who's been an MCAT tutor and pre-med advisor for a decade now, I'm going to be responding to this very transparent YouTube video by Danny Lee titled, Why This Top 0.1% Pre-Med is Not Going to Medical School, Application Breakdown. So I appreciate Danny for being very transparent about his process of applying to medical school. This is my first time reacting to the video, so I'm going to be seeing everything for the first time. I'm going to give my 2 cents on what might have went wrong and how you can hopefully avoid some of the mistakes that Danny may have made and what we can overall learn from the process.
So I did not get into med school, and this is despite a 3.95 undergrad GPA and a 5.27 on my MCAT, which definitely qualified me to apply to all the top schools. So
those are insanely good stats. A 5.27, as you know, is almost a perfect score. So that plus the 3.95 GPA, I wonder what a science GPA is, but either way, I'm sure it's high. Yes, those stats can get you into any school. So it's obviously going to be everything else that matters. And so let's find out a little bit more about what happened.
What happened? What went wrong? And how can you learn from my mistakes? I'm going to break that all down right now, all the red flags in my application. But first, a little bit of background. I'm an economics undergrad student. I did my pre-med post-bac, and then I did a master's in music school. So it's a bit of a non-traditional path, but that can actually be an advantage if you spin it well. The first red flag was my submission timing. You can see here that I did submit my primary application on time, just a few days after it opened, and it took 6 weeks to get processed. Still very early in the cycle, no problem here. So
this is true. As you could see, he submitted on time, which is great. And as you could also see, it took 6 weeks for the application to get processed. So what does this mean? Application getting processed is essentially the AMCAS app looking at all the grades and matching that up with your transcript and then giving you the final calculated GPA. And so this is why I recommend to apply as early as possible, because you can apply and it still takes 6 additional weeks. Now this, because he was so early, it doesn't matter. He was on the right timeline, at least for now. I guess we're about to see what happened. But this is again why I highly encourage students to be prepared to apply in June. And really, if you're not on the first day, it's fine, but you really shouldn't be waiting until July or August to submit your primary application.
Secondaries were a different story. It's recommended that you submit your secondaries within 2 weeks after receiving them. All the prompts are usually carried over from the year before, so you can pre-write them during your primary processing period. But I submitted my secondaries between 6 to 8 weeks later, and I'll talk about why in a minute.
Okay, so that's pretty generic advice, but I think is a good rule of thumb. So try to get the secondaries back 2 weeks after you get them. And he is right. A lot of times secondaries are the same from year to year. What we do with all our students is if they have a Premed Tracker account in premedtracker.io, if you want, you could go sign up for a free account today. If you're a pro member, you could actually choose different schools to apply to and work on pre-writing your secondaries. Now, sometimes they do change from year to year, but you could get a pretty good kickstart to the secondary application process by writing them ahead of time. And think about it. Once you submit your primary app, you don't have anything to do because you haven't gotten those secondaries yet, and you should have already been done with your MCAT. So instead of just doing nothing, this is the time to start pre-writing those secondaries to the best of your ability. And even if you're not writing using last year's prompts, there's certain prompts that come up every single year. So what we have all our students focus on are questions like, what's a time you've worked with a team? What's a time you've had to overcome a challenge? These very common secondary essays that commonly come up.
But this delay seriously cost me. The med school application process is a rolling admissions, meaning that the interview spots get snapped up quick and the earlier applicants have a huge edge. So if you're applying...
This is fairly true. So a lot of schools, not all, but a lot of schools have a rolling admissions process in the fact that the interviews, right? When you start off, let's say they're going to give out 250 interviews. Well, a lot of those interviews go out early. And so the later you apply, the less interview spots that are available. And so if I'm an admissions committee member and I now know there's only 50 interview spots left, I'm going to be more selective with who I'm giving those interviews out to as I'm reading the apps. And also, you may be comparing to now past candidates, whereas you're sort of starting off fresh if you're in the early batch. So there's a lot of different psychology that goes into this. Also, just the general statistics of being early is helpful. Not all schools do this, but a majority of schools do. And schools want to see that you're responsible and you're prompt. And so if this is your career and this is something that you really want to do, you should have a good reason to be applying late. Otherwise, I recommend just applying in the next cycle.
Applying the cycle, don't make that mistake. Get your primary and your secondary in as early as possible. All right. Now, my second red flag was my clinical experience. What admissions committees are looking for is demonstrated commitment to medicine. They want to know that you know exactly what you're getting into. Now, let's take a look at my app. I worked as an EMT for a few months in 2021, and then I did some shadowing here and some volunteering here, and not much else. So that definitely raised a few questions. What was up with this huge gap in my clinical experience? Here is the real, unfiltered truth. I don't enjoy clinical work at all. I find it grueling. I find it boring. And I don't find it particularly meaningful. Every once in a while, I would make like a real difference in a patient's life. And that would feel good, but those moments were so few and far between. And that's why I didn't really have clinical hours. I avoided it.
Okay, so I'm not really sure where Danny's going to end up with in regards to this video, if he's still applying to medical school, but clinical experience is important. Shadowing is important. And it's not the best indication if you hate clinical experience. Now, working as an EMT or a medical assistant, it's obviously not the same as if you're going to be the physician in the room, but you should enjoy, especially early on, working with patients and being hands-on with them. And even if it's a small impact that you're making on them, that's the first step towards this ultimate long journey that you're going to be on. And so maybe a cause for caution if you're thinking of applying to medical school and you absolutely hate clinical experience. Now, maybe some experiences are just going to be bad. Like, that's really true. You may have a medical assistant role in a specialty you don't like, and it's a toxic work environment. But that's why it's important to get a few different experiences to see if there's areas that you like. And that's also why the medical school admissions committees want to see that you've had a variety of these experiences so they can see that you know what you're getting yourself into. And that's also why shadowing is very important, because shadowing, you're really seeing what it's like to be the doctor and the life of a doctor, which is different than doing different types of clinical experience where you're not actually serving in that role. You're not serving in that role in shadowing, but at least you're shadowing and you're getting to see what it's like and what you can hopefully envision your future to be like.
My research. Although I had a lot of research hours, I only had 1/3 author publication. So this helped me a little bit, maybe. Didn't hurt me. But overall, my experiences don't really demonstrate any sort of commitment to medicine. The third red flag was in my writing. First, I want to talk about the institutional action. So I was caught drinking in the dorms as a freshman. And despite what you might expect, this is not really a red flag. If you explain it, admit wrongdoing, and take responsibility for your actions, most schools don't really care about this.
I wouldn't say they don't really care about it. In the totality of everything, it probably doesn't help you. Unfortunately, things like this you do have to report. And if you write about it appropriately and show a reflection and take ownership, they'll look past it, but it's not going to look positively on you. And so there's many students that have gone into medical school and they've had institutional action. It's not the end of the world, but when you take it into the totality of everything, then there has to be an even stronger pull for why that med school would want to send you an interview or take you as a student into their class?
Primary, I talk about my motivations for being a doctor and my journey through like music and medicine. And this was pretty good. Like I felt good about my primary, but again, my secondaries were a real issue. Now, what schools expect to see in your secondaries is kind of a development of your character, drawing from clinical experiences with patients, maybe a little bit of research. And I realized I just didn't have any of these really meaningful clinical experiences. And I ended up writing about music and music school, which was definitely confusing for the admissions committees. And they were probably thinking to themselves, is this guy really serious about medicine?
So I think Danny's doing a really good job of being introspective, because that really, both your primaries and your secondaries, is the real question, right? Why do you want to be a doctor? And not even just why medicine, but why specifically doctor? The exercise I like to use with students is I tell them, if I can take this essay and submit it to PA school or nursing school or any other school in the healthcare profession and just take out the word doctor, would it still work? And if the answer is yes, then you haven't well defined enough specifically why you want to be a physician. And yeah, drawing from these other experiences like music, etc., it's good. It can make you unique. But if it's not clear that you actually want to be a doctor, which I think from the lack of shadowing and clinical experiences, the lack of the way that the answers are written for, it sounds like the secondaries, I'd have to take a look at the actual personal statement. Maybe it is a strong personal statement. I find also a lot of students, not saying that it's in Danny's case, but a lot of students think they wrote a really good personal statement when they really didn't. And so that's why it is helpful to have a professional sometimes look at it. If that's something you're interested in, you could click the link below, and we're happy to get on a call with you and discuss how our services at the Premed Consultants may be of service to you. But in general, a lot of students will be very proud of your personal statement, which you should be. It's very hard to write a good personal statement. But if your mom or your dad likes your personal statement, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. A lot of students don't realize what actually is supposed to go into the personal statement and what red flags might scare away admissions committee members. So I highly recommend you really put a lot of thought and time into it. And again, a good exercise would be, can I submit this to any other medical professional school and it work? If it can, then it's not specific enough to why doctor. And really, the personal statement should show your journey to figuring out why you want to be a doctor. And it should also be personal. It's in the name, personal statement. I should want to know more about you after reading that personal statement. And also, I should know about you as a person and some of your personality traits and characteristics and human side that also go outside of just medicine. And if you could do those two things, now you're on the right track to writing a strong personal statement.
And the answer is probably not. To be honest, I had some less than noble motivations for wanting to be a medical student, including the status and the validation of being in med school. And while I did enjoy learning about the human body, I was pretty much prepared to drop out if any other opportunity presented itself, like if my creative career took off. And I was actually so unmotivated that I didn't even finish all of my secondaries. So I have to feel like the admissions committees for the schools that I did apply to either saw right through me or noticed all the red flags and decided that there were just better candidates to take a chance on. And honestly, fair. And that is why, despite my near perfect stats, I didn't receive a single med school interview. Now, I talk about this a little more in depth in my Substack, which you can find in the description below. But let me know in the comments, does this seem like a reasonable breakdown?
So this is a great story, and I really appreciate Danny's transparency here, and I wish him all the best in his endeavors. It sounds like he won't be pursuing medical school, but this is a really good example of how stats are not everything. And truthfully, the admissions committees can sense if someone is dedicated to wanting to be a doctor or if you're just a bright student. And in this case, it seems like they perfectly sniffed that out, that really Danny's heart wasn't in being a doctor specifically. He just was a very smart student that wanted to apply to medical school. And, nowadays especially, it used to happen less, but you see creators go into medical school and they become meta influencers and then they drop out, or other career opportunities come up and people switch out of medicine. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're applying to medical school, given how many people want those spots, you really should, at that point, at least in time, maybe things change, but at that point in time, you really should want to be a doctor. You should really have done your homework, and that's through shadowing and clinical experience and all the extracurriculars, and really figured out also, and through that introspective process of writing it out in the personal statement, why you want to be a physician. And that goes a long way above just stats. So great story, really good example for you students. That, I'll just be frank with you, like, a lot of students freak out about the grades. I've had students who started working with the Premed Consultants with less than a 3.0 and less than a 500 MCAT score, who are now in medical school, and actually, and someone I'm thinking of is now even in residency. And so you don't have to have perfect stats. Do the good grades and MCAT scores help? They absolutely do, and they are important. But what also is really important is being in it for the right reasons. And so I'll leave you with that. I hope this video was helpful and insightful. If you're interested in this type of content, then please like, subscribe. It means the world to me, and I'm going to keep pushing out pre-med videos just like this.